Oh, I didn't know we had started. Hi, welcome back. Today, we're going to talk about theater of diversity. When I was first studying theater, and we studied theater history and theater literature and those things, all we ever studied, all we ever learned about was Western theater. And we talked about American theater. Sometimes we would talk about the French or maybe the Russians. But for the most part, all we ever really talked about were what I now call dead white guys. I mean, they were the established playwrights, actors, etc. And we got nothing of other cultures. And I want you in this series to have an understanding of different cultures, different races, different sexes, other than the dead white guys. And I'm going to begin my lecture today talking about African American theater. The first African American theater in the United States was in New York City, and it was in 1827. There was a gentleman by the name of William Brown. Sometimes he's referred to as Billy Brown. William Brown owned a tea shop, and it was a pretty popular hangout at the time. It's a lot like today, young people going to Starbucks to, meet their friends, talk over coffee. That's what the tea shops were like in the 1800s. And Brown's tea shop was referred to as the African Grove. The African Grove was pretty popular. He brought in entertainers. He loved theater. And one of the things that he would do at his tea shop, the African Grove, would be to have actors perform monologues from plays, especially the plays of Shakespeare. And several really good actors began to perform there. And it wasn't long until he got a second idea. He loved theater so much, and he had such talent, that he decided to change the African Grove from a tea shop to a theater. And it became known as the African Grove Theater. And the actors who performed there were referred to as the African Company. All these actors were freed slaves. They had come from the Caribbean or from other states and settled in New York City. One of these actors was a man by the name of James Hewlett. And Hewlett was very well known for performing Shakespeare. Another of his actors was a gentleman by the name of Ira Aldrich, also a very, very talented actor. Well, what happened was they began to perform plays. They did Shakespeare, and the plays were so good that not just the blacks living in New York came to see them, but whites as well. It became a popular place. Well, they were going to do a play, Shakespeare's play, Richard III. And across town, in one of the white theaters, there was a gentleman acting. He was an actor manager, and His name was Junius Brutus Booth. He's the father of John Wilkes Booth and Edwin Booth. Junius Brutus Booth was a star at the time, and it just so happened he was performing Richard III at the White Theater. He did not like the idea that these freed slaves were performing Shakespeare, and especially the play he was doing. He complained to the owner of the theater. The owner of the theater complained to the police, and the police showed up at the African Grove Theater and closed them down. And they shut them down, supposedly, for fire violations. The theater was unsafe. They got the theater reopened. They did the things that they were supposed to do. And again, the police came. This time, they arrested the company. They arrested William Brown. We know James Hewlett was there. They arrested them. They put them in jail. And here's the interesting thing. While in jail, they were told by the police if they signed a paper, which when they signed it, they would be promising never to do Shakespeare again, they would be let free. If they sign a paper saying you won't do Shakespeare, we'll let you out of jail. Some of the actors did not want to do this, and William Brown said yes, he was going to sign. And when asked why, he says, well, they didn't say we couldn't do any theater. So they did sign the papers. They got out of jail. It wasn't long after that that William Brown wrote a play, and it was called King Shotaway. King Shotaway was a story of a Caribbean king, and it was performed, and unfortunately, today we do not have a copy of King Shotaway. We do know that they did the play. There are reviews and things written about it from newspapers. But unfortunately, the script has disappeared. I think that would be a great find if someday an archaeologist or a historian would come across the original play, King Shotaway. But King Shotaway is the first play written by an African-American author, and his name, William Brown. This story is in a current play. It's called The African Company Presents Richard III. It's a wonderful play, and it's written by a gentleman by the name of Carlisle Brown. Carlisle Brown is a professor and a playwright, and he's written a number of wonderful plays. Most of his plays deal with African American history. The African Company Presents Richard III is one of his plays. Another of his plays that you should look up and read if you get the chance, it's called The Buffalo Hare. Buffalo Hare is a story about the 10th Cavalry, and they're fighting against the Sioux. And it takes place while they're sitting around a campfire. And the men in the 10th Cavalry are discussing whether or not they are on the right side. Maybe they should turn and fight with the Sioux, because when they go into town, they are not treated very well. Though they are incredible soldiers, and the 10th Cavalry was an incredible unit in the United States Army. In fact, they would show great bravery, not only fighting against the Sioux, but they were in the Spanish-American War and were part of the soldiers who took San Juan Hill. the 10th Cavalry, they have this discussion in the play, and they decide that they will do their duty, that they will do what a soldier should do. They've been ordered into battle, and they bravely go. It's a great play, again, by Carlisle Brown. I want to go back and talk a little bit more about what happened to some of the actors who were in the African company. James Hewlett continued to act. Because of the prejudice against him, he couldn't act in the United States, so he traveled to other countries. And in fact, we know that he eventually ended up in Trinidad. And we know that he performed Shakespeare's Othello in 1839 in Trinidad. There are lost records of him after that. We're not sure where he ended up. Now, Ira Aldridge, on the other hand, became an international star. He traveled to Europe, and he performed Shakespeare all over Europe, and he was greatly honored in England and in Switzerland, and also in Poland. He received a number of awards. He got a White Cross from Switzerland, a gold medal from Prussia, and when he died in Poland in 1867, he was honored and he was buried in a graveyard along with many other honored artists from around Europe. And he would receive a plaque also in the Shakespeare Memorial Theatre at Stratford-upon-Avon in England. So though because of their color, they could not perform in the United States, we know that they went on and performed elsewhere, and especially with Ira Aldridge, became an international star. After the African company, there's not a lot of information about African American theater in the United States. Not until we get to the 1930s. And during the Great Depression, one of the programs set up by the Roosevelt administration was what is referred to as the Federal Theater Project. And the idea in the Federal Theater Project was to help create new theaters in areas around the country where they had none, where they needed help. And they targeted a number of African American communities around the country. In fact, 22 cities got money through the Federal Theater Project to create theaters for African Americans. The Federal Theater Project was a wonderful thing, giving work to out-of-work artists in the United States during a very, very hard time. It eventually died, though. It went away. There was talk at that time of creating a national theater. We are the only major country in the world that does not have a national theater. And they thought it was time. We should create one. And so through the Federal Theater Project, a national theater was going to be created, and it would be in Washington, D.C. And I just think this is a funny story. The company got together. They decided to do a play. And the first play that they performed was called A Cradle Will Rock. And A Cradle Will Rock was a play that was a satire of the American Congress. It performed, and that was the end. That was the end of the National Theater. Congress yanked their money, and we've never had one since. I've always found that astounding, how we came so close, and then the actors involved, the artists involved, bit the hand that fed them. And so today, we do not have a national theater. Over the years, there have been many, many incredible African-American artists. The first one I want to talk about is an actor, and his name was Paul Robeson. Paul Robeson was born in 1898. He was from New Jersey, Princeton, New Jersey. And he was extremely intelligent. In 1915, he goes to Rutgers University. He graduates in 1919 with one of the highest grade point averages at the school. He then decided to go to law school, and he wants to become a lawyer. While he is attending school, while he's working as a student, he found a way to make extra money. You see, he was a singer, and he went and got work at in Harlem at the Cotton Club. The Cotton Club was one of the most fancy, one of the greatest supper clubs in the United States at the time. And people from all over, white, black, everyone, wanted, if they had the money, wanted to go to the Cotton Club because all the greatest performers were going to be there. And they wanted to be part of that action. They wanted to see that. It was the hot club of the time. And he performed there. He also, and I find this amazing, he also played for not one, but two different professional football teams. So he's going to law school, he's singing at the Cotton Club, and he's playing professional football for two different teams. His singing at the Cotton Club got him an acting job. There was a playwright named Eugene O'Neill, and if you don't know Eugene O'Neill, look him up because he's one of the biggies. Eugene O'Neill sees Paul Robeson perform at the Cotton Club, and he approached him and got him to act in his play, All God's Chillun Got Wings. That was in 1923. So now he's a professional actor, he is a singer, he is a football player, and he graduates from law school, so he's a lawyer. Robeson did not stop with that one play. He was in many plays. He ends up in the movie business. One of his big roles that he is still remembered for is he plays Joe in Showboat, and he will be remembered all his life for the role of Joe and singing the song Old Man River. He finally, over time, he becomes very concerned about civil rights in the United States, and he gets involved in the civil rights movement. He meets Dr. King. He takes part in marches. As a lawyer, he helps the NAACP. And he is not satisfied with just civil rights in the United States. He begins to travel all over the world, working for civil rights, for equal rights. if he only did one of those things, he would have been a great man. But he did them all, and he did them all very well. Now I'd like to talk about a playwright. His name is James Baldwin. Baldwin was born in Harlem, in New York, in 1924. He was the oldest of 9 children, and his father was a minister. Baldwin loved reading. Apparently he spent much of his time as a child in libraries, and he had a passion for writing. And this led to a conflict with his father. His father, again being a preacher, thought that James should follow his footsteps and that he should become a minister as well. But Baldwin did not want to do that. He really wanted to write professionally, and he leaves home. He moves to Greenwich Village, and he works there as a freelance writer. After a while, he leaves the United States, and he goes to Paris, and he writes there. He finally ends up in Switzerland, where his first novel comes out, and it's called Go Tell It on the Mountain. In 1954, he writes his first play, and it becomes an immediate hit. It's called The Amen Corner. It's a play about faith and family. A lot of people believe it's autobiographical, that it's about a young son and his father. It has been called a masterpiece of the modern American theater. It is an incredible play. And he follows that with another play called Blues for Mr. Charlie. Eventually, he becomes a college professor. He teaches in the African American Studies program at the University of Massachusetts. And he continues to write as well as teach. But he develops cancer, and he finally leaves the United States. He goes to France hoping that he can find a cure, but he passes away of stomach cancer in 1987. But he leaves us with a number of great novels and stories and 2 excellent plays. Remember James Baldwin. The next playwright that I want to talk about is a female African-American playwright. Her name is Lorraine Hansberry. Lorraine Hansberry was born in 1930 in Chicago. Her family was well off, and she lived a wonderful childhood. She goes to college at the University of Wisconsin, and there she studies art. She has a dilemma after that, because do you stay in art or do you write? Do you do theater? She loved both. Well, she would continue to do both, and do both very well for the rest of her life. In 1953, she moves to New York City, and she begins working on a play. And this play will become one of the great American dramas. A Raisin in the Sun. A Raisin in the Sun opened in the Barrymore Theater in 1959. It's the first African-American play to ever be produced on Broadway. That's very important to remember. A Raisin in the Sun, the first African-American play to ever be produced on Broadway. It won many, many awards, and it became a play that was performed all across the world. It's a lovely play. It's a domestic drama. And when I talk about domestic drama, Domestic dramas are about family. A lot of television shows are domestic dramas. We also have domestic comedies. But domestic dramas tend to be realistic in style, and they mix drama and comedy, just as happens in real life, in real families. A Raisin in the Sun is about a young family. The father has passed away. He had a insurance policy, and he leaves a lot of money to his family. Then there's a discussion in the family, and that's what this play is about, is the family's trying to decide what they're going to do with this inheritance. We meet the son. The son is a dreamer. He wants to invest the money in some get-rich-quick scheme. The daughter, who wants the money to help support her endeavors in education. And then there's the wife. And the wife finally wins out with the argument in the family. And what she decides to do with the money is she wants to move out of their apartment out to the suburbs and have a house with a yard. She loves gardening. She wants to plant. And she's dreamed of a house with a yard all her life. And after a number of rough spots, I won't go into all the details, but the family finally agrees to this. Home is purchased in the suburbs, and we discover that it is in an all-white neighborhood. A gentleman shows up at their apartment who claims to be a representative of the neighborhood. He talks to them and says in their best interest, he has come to purchase their home, and he will pay more than they paid for it because they really don't want to live in that neighborhood. The son gets very angry. The rest of the family does too. They stand up, they unite together for the first time. They all unite together, and they tell this man, we will be neighbors. And the play ends with them getting ready to move to the all-white neighborhood. It is a beautiful play. It's performed a lot. It has been turned into film. One of the latest is Sean Combs playing the son. Sidney Poitier did the play, and it continues to be relevant and to play to modern audiences. So don't forget Lorraine Hansberry. Unfortunately, she also got cancer, and she passed away at a very young age in 1965. There has been another play, it's called To Be Young, Gifted, and Black. She actually didn't write the play. It's a collection of her poems and stories, and they were put together at the end of her life, and it was turned into a play. But if she had never written anything else, she will always be remembered for A Raisin in the Sun. The next playwright that I'd like to talk about is Amiri Baraka. He is also known as Leroy Jones. He was born as Leroy Jones in 1934 in Newark, New Jersey. He was mainly a poet. He wrote many, many poems, and during his life he would become the poet laureate of the state of New Jersey. He is credited with over 40 books, plays, and they cover a lot of different topics. But most of his work deals with the trials and tribulations of living in the inner city. His plays became very popular in the 1960s, and they are filled with rage. His plays are about living in the inner city, about being African American, and about the civil rights. I mean, what is going to happen? Where are we going to go? And he tried to show a really clear portrait of what was taking place in the African American community. Two plays of his that I think you should know are Dutchman and The Toilet. I know that's a funny name for a play, but The Toilet is very, very powerful. When I was a young man, I actually acted in that play when I was in college. The Toilet deals with gangs, and also deals with the problem of being homosexual in an inner city school. The story basically is it takes place in a high school bathroom. A gang of teens drag a body into the bathroom, and they are beating up the person. They've already been beating him up, but now they continue to work him over. And what we discover is they have learned that there's a rumor going around that this homosexual is in love with one of their gang members, and they want to find out who it is. And so they're torturing him. It's very rough to watch this play. I mean, they really, really beat this boy badly. Finally, he's about ready to speak, and one of the gang members goes ballistic and just kicks him and beats him. And they believe, we are led to believe as audience members, that they've killed him. And the gang laughs about this, thinks it's funny that this guy, just went ballistic on the young man. And they leave the bathroom, and there's this bloody body laying there in the stall. And in walks the young man who beat this young student to death. And he picks up the body and he holds it. And he says, "I'm sorry." And the play ends. It's very, very brutal, but it's also very touching. His other play, Dutchman, which came out in 1963, is a little different. It's about a African-American man. He seems to be doing well financially. He's on a train, gets on a car in a subway, and as the car is going down the track, an attractive white woman comes over and sits with him, and she begins to flirt with him. They begin talking. They talk about a lot of different things. And eventually, she pulls a knife and kills him. The play doesn't end there. She gets up out of her seat, moves to another seat next to another black man, and she begins the same conversation over. And so it is as though the play is rebooted and the exact same thing is going to happen again. So we see this serial killer moving from black man to black man, killing them, and no one else on the train seems to pay any attention. It's, again, very powerful. It borders on theater of the absurd, again, because some of it is not realistic. But it is easy to follow and quite brutal, as all his plays are. He would eventually change his name from Leroy Jones to Amiri Baraka, and he continued to write. He started a school in New Jersey, in the inner city, that teaches the arts. And Amiri Baraka just recently passed away, but he will forever be remembered as a poet and a playwright. Well, let's talk about another playwright. He's a playwright and an artistic director. His name is George C. Wolfe. George C. Wolfe was born in 1954 in Frankfort, Kentucky. He's with us today. He's a director, as I said, a producer, a writer, and artistic. He's artistic director at the Public Theater. And by being artistic director at the Public Theater, he's also the artistic director of the New York Shakespeare Festival. He went to New York University, where he got his MFA in 1983. And then he began writing. One of his plays is called The Colored Museum. It came out in 1986. It's a very interesting play. The setting is made to look like a museum, and the exhibits come alive. And all the exhibits are African Americans from different times in history. To give you an example of what the play is like, it begins with what looks like an airline stewardess comes out, and she's wearing the whole uniform, and she gives the speech that you always get on an airplane about tightening your seat belts, and if case of an emergency, here's how you get out. Except what we learn in this speech is she's talking about a slave ship, and instead of tighten your seat belts, it's tighten your chains. The play is filled with humor, but the humor is very dark. And you, at times when you see this play, you might laugh at something and then all of a sudden realize, why am I laughing at this? This is horrible. It's a very good play, continues to be produced all over the world. But Wolfe, as I said today, is mainly known as an artistic director of the Public Theater. Joseph Papp, who had been the director of the Public Theater, who saved Broadway by bringing in minority writers, actors, doing plays for the youth, pretty much handpicked George C. Wolfe to follow him when he retired. And Wolfe has continued that same tradition as a director. He brings in, they produce plays that really focus on minorities, continue to focus on all sorts of subjects that other theaters in New York or elsewhere might not want to tackle. And they've been very successful in doing this. One of the playwrights that he discovered is a young African-American woman named Susan Laurie Parks. Susan Laurie Parks won a Pulitzer Prize for her play Top Dog, Underdog. It's an excellent play, and she continues to write new plays. She won the Pulitzer in 2002. She won that Pulitzer in 2002. And as I said, she continues to write and has become one of America's greatest living playwrights. Wow, it's getting a little warm in here. Whew. Excuse me. The next playwright I want to talk about is one of my all-time favorite playwrights. His name is August Wilson. August Wilson is from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He was born in 1945. I don't know if I've mentioned this. It's really easy to remember August Wilson. He's from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And as we all know, Pittsburgh is the home of one of the two teams in the NFL that has won 6 Super Bowls. And Wilson is from that city, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's, like I said, just one of the cities. I need to adjust this. Oh, yeah, my pillow. Like I said, it's just one of the cities that won 6 Super Bowls. The Pittsburgh Steelers. It's just an interesting fact. Anyway, as I said, he was born in 1945, and he became a playwright starting in 1981, and he went on to write a number of great plays. And all the plays deal with African American history in the city of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The plays aren't connected, but they're about different people at different time periods in history in that city. 2 of his plays won Pulitzer Prizes. The first one was in 1987, and he won the Pulitzer Prize for his play Fences. I'm pretty lucky. I actually saw Fences when it was on Broadway, when it first opened, and it starred James Earl Jones. It's a great story about a father and a son. Again, it's another domestic drama. The father had played baseball in the old Negro leagues and is very bitter that he never got the chance to play in the major leagues because of the prejudice against his race. His son is getting ready to graduate from high school, and he's been offered a scholarship to play football at a college. And the father tells him he will not take that scholarship. And his reasoning is, the white man will use you the way I have been used. If you want to make it in college, you will do it on scholarship, not on sports. And there's a rift in the family. The mother is pretty upset about all this. And then a bomb is dropped on the family. Not a real bomb, but a woman shows up with a baby, and we discover that the father is the father of the baby. And the mother of the family tells Troy, her husband, that our son is going to college. He's going to take that scholarship. You are going to take care of this family, but you will never sleep with me again. And that's how the play ends. It's a powerful piece, very realistic. And as I said, it won his first Pulitzer Prize. Then he does a second play and then his second Pulitzer Prize is for a play called The Piano Lesson. Again, about a family in Pittsburgh. And I would love for you to watch this film. I'm going to put the address up here for you to see it. You really need to see the movie version of The Piano Lesson. It's very, though it's a film, it's very, very close to what you would see if you saw the stage play. I want you to see that because it will give you an excellent chance to see a Pulitzer Prize winning play and an incredible domestic drama from one of the world's greatest playwrights, who is from, did I mention that he's from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania? I don't know if I mentioned that. Yeah, he's from Pittsburgh, and that's the home of the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's the one NFL team, there are only two, that has won 6 Super Bowls. Just a minor fact. Just thought I'd bring that up again. Anyway, I want you to see The Piano Lesson. It's an incredible play. Wilson would pass away in 2005. He was only 60 years old, but he got liver cancer. And unfortunately, we lost a great playwright. But he left us with 10 plays, again, all dealing with the city of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Now we're going to move on and talk about some world influences that have affected American theater. We're going to talk about 3 different Asian countries: China, India, and Japan. I'm going to begin by talking about India. India theater goes way back into time. And the one big influence, the one style of theater that they are famous for is called Sanskrit drama. Sanskrit drama. Sanskrit drama was written for the upper classes. It's very intelligent plays and very literary. Talks about heroes and characters from their history, from their stories. Probably the most famous writers of Sanskrit drama was a gentleman by the name of Kalidasa. Kalidasa. Kalidasa wrote a play called The Remembrance of Shakuntala. The Remembrance of Shakuntala. It was a story about a young woman. She goes through many trials and tribulations and finally ends up living at the palace. And it is considered one of the great Sanskrit dramas. Now let's talk about China. The Chinese wrote very serious plays. And the one that I would like you to remember is a play called The Romance of the Western Chamber. It is still performed in China today. It was written by a playwright named Wang Shifu. Wang Shifu. In this play, it's a love story, and there's a young man, there's a young woman, they fall deeply in love, and then he decides that he needs to leave her to follow his career, and he goes to live in the palace, and he leaves her behind. It has a very sad ending, and it's considered, a love tragedy. Probably the country that has contributed the most to theater is Japan. Japan has a number of traditions in theater. The first one that I want to talk about took place in Japan around the 1300s. It's called No theater.
What do you mean, no? I thought you said they had theater.
Yes, no theater.
No theater?
Yes, no theater.
No theater?
Yes, no theater.
Did they have theater or not? You say that they did, but they didn't.
No, I didn't say they didn't. I said they had no theater.
They didn't have any theater.
No, you idiot. They had no theater.
Well, if they didn't have theater, then why are you saying they had theater? What was it called?
No.
You're not gonna tell me?
No.
No?
Yes.
So they called the theater Yes Theater.
No, it wasn't yes theater. It was no theater.
No theater?
No theater. Yes.
So they called it Yes.
No.
No?
Yes.
Yes.
Let's just go on. Let's talk about Bunraku puppetry. I think that's safer. I don't like that guy. Anyway, Bunraku theater is puppet theater. It was very popular in Japan, and it still is. In the Bunraku, the puppets are about 2/3 human size. They're very, very large puppets. And when they perform, the puppeteer wears black, and you see the puppeteer speaking for the puppet as they hold the puppet and work it. And the beauty of the Bunraku theater is you forget that the puppeteer is actually there. You begin to focus on the puppet, and you watch it perform, even though the puppeteer is never hidden. They're in plain sight. We have a Bunraku style theater here in the United States that is done by a company called Kids on the Block. Kids on the Block's a wonderful, wonderful company. They create the scripts, they build the puppets, and they lease them to theaters around the United States. And in these stories, each of the puppets has a disability. So there's a deaf puppet, there's a blind puppet, one puppet has cerebral palsy, and the idea is the puppet company, Kids on the Block, is to teach young children that people with disabilities are no different than they are. And that's the theme in all their stories. They actually sing a song, Kids Are Different. Kids aren't different. They're the same as you and me. It continues, and Bunraku is spread across the country. We see Bunraku style puppets on Broadway. I recently saw Shrek the Musical, and there's a Bunraku style puppet used in that production. Though it began in Japan and continues to be performed in Japan, Bunraku style puppets are now performed in many places around the world. The last Japanese theater that I'd like to talk about is Kabuki. Kabuki theater started in the 1600s, And in kabuki, the actors are trained from childhood. So if you are going to be a performer in the kabuki theater, you're brought in as a child and you work on that style of performance for years and years and years. In the kabuki theater, even today, only men perform. Men play all the roles. It is very stylized. In kabuki, they use very large gestures. And the stories tend to be, again, tragic in nature, though they can be comic. And they tell the stories that have passed down through generations in Japan. I've actually done some training in kabuki theater. It's wonderful to work on. There have been productions in the United States that have used kabuki style acting. There was a wonderful production of the Scottish play Macbeth a few years back that was done all in kabuki style. So it's still with us. It's very popular in Japan, but that style of acting is now being used and adapted into other theaters all across the world. Let's talk about a contemporary, he's a Chinese-American playwright. His name is David Henry Hwang. David Henry Hwang has been writing plays since the 1980s here in the United States. And he's considered now one of our great playwrights. Probably his most famous play is called M. Butterfly. M. Butterfly won the Pulitzer Prize in 1989. Hwang, in this play, talks about Chinese history. And it's the story of a British diplomat serving in China who goes to see the Peking Opera and falls madly in love with the female lead. Of course, as the play continues, we discover, and he discovers, that the female lead, of course, is a man, since all the men play all the leading roles, or play all the roles. And it's a powerful play. As I said, it won the Pulitzer Prize in 1989. Hwang continues to write, and he will be remembered for many, many years to come for the plays that he has written. Let's move on to Hispanic theater. There's a strong theatrical tradition in Spain. During the time that Shakespeare was writing tragedies in England, there was a Spanish tragic playwright named Lope de Vega. De Vega wrote many plays. He lived between 1562 and 1635. His most famous play is called The Sheep Well. It's a very powerful tragedy. It's about a village in Spain that is being attacked by a gang of ruffians. The men in the town do not stand up to these people. The women do. And the main character in the play is a young woman who ends up being beaten, raped, and when the ruffians finally leave, she turns to her father and the other elders of the city, or not city, it's a little village, and tells them that they are nothing but sheep. Extremely, extremely powerful play. Lope de Vega supposedly wrote many, many plays. Not all of them have survived. But The Sheepwell is his one big hit, which still gets performed today. There are a number of contemporary Hispanic American plays and playwrights. There are basically three types of Hispanic theater in the United States today. They are Chicano theater, Cuban American theater, and Puerto Rican theater. Chicano theater comes from Mexico, and the father of Chicano theater is a gentleman by the name of Luis Valdez. Valdez is a director and playwright. He has written a number of plays that fall in this category of Chicano theater. A lot of his plays deal with the plights of farm workers. They tell the stories of immigrants who have come to the United States from Mexico, and of the trials and tribulations that they go through working on the farms around the United States. These plays started in the 1960s, and they are still with us. Puerto Rican theater is also very popular. In fact, a lot of Puerto Rican theater have been helped through the Public Theater in New York. Again, the Public Theater's mission is to help minorities, and since there is a very large Puerto Rican population in New York City, a theater was started there, and they're called the Puerto Rican Traveling Theater. The Puerto Rican Traveling Theater, their mission is to introduce to American audiences new Hispanic playwrights. Not everything they do is done by Puerto Rican writers, but by Hispanic writers from all over the world, and certainly from the United States. This company has its own theater. They perform at that theater, and as their name suggests, they tour productions around New York and around the United States. The Cuban American theater is mostly in Florida, and they got a big boost from the Federal Theater Project in the 1930s, where some of these theaters began. Today, the most famous of the Cuban American playwrights is a woman named Maria Irene Fornes. Maria Irene Fornes. She has written a number of plays over the years. The play Fefu and Her Friends is one of her most popular plays. It's a story of a woman named Fefu, and a group of women come to her home, her friends, and they talk about many different subjects during their stay with Fefu. Ms. Fornes is known not only as a Cuban American writer, but she's also known for her feminist plays. She's still with us and still creating wonderful, powerful pieces dealing with women and dealing with the Cuban American community. Let's move on now, and we're going to talk about Native American theater. Now, we know from studying history, Native Americans have had music and acted out stories about their ancestors and their gods for thousands of years. There are some Native American theater companies today, and there are certainly have been a number of plays written about Native Americans. Probably the most famous Native American playwright, who also wrote some film, was a gentleman named Raleigh Lynn Riggs. Raleigh Lynn Riggs. Riggs was born in 1899. He was a Cherokee Indian, and he died in 1954. His most famous play is called Green Grow the Lilacs. Green Grow the Lilacs tells a story that takes place in Oklahoma. And it was this story, this play, that Rodgers and Hammerstein took and then rewrote into the musical Oklahoma. But Raleigh Lynn Riggs did write other plays, but he is most famous for Green Grow the Lilacs. One area I haven't talked about is Mideastern Islamic theater. There is a tradition in the Mideast countries, goes back thousands of years. They basically do two types of plays. One type is the passion play. Passion plays are plays done that deal with the religion. These plays often tell the stories of the prophets, and as I said, they've been performed for many, many, many years, and they remain popular in the Mideast. The other type of theater that they do and have done in the Mideast are shadow plays. Shadow plays are a form of puppet theater. And I'm going to show you an example of a shadow play here in just a moment. These shadow plays, or shadows of fancy, are performed a lot of times around religious festivals, especially Ramadan. One of the most famous of the shadow play playwrights was a gentleman by the name of Muhammad ibn Daniel. Muhammad ibn Daniel. He was writing plays during the 13th century. His plays tend to be comedies. Some of them are quite bawdy. In fact, he has been compared to the Greek playwright Aristotle, who wrote comedies. His plays, again, the shadow plays are puppet plays. Muhammad ibn Daniel was from Saudi Arabia, and he traveled to Egypt, and that's where he did most of his writing. I want to show you, as I said, an example of what a shadow play would look like, and we'll go to that right now.
Ah, yes, this is a fertile land, and we will thrive, and we will rule over all this land, and we will call it, this land. I think we should call it your grave. Oh, curse your sudden but inevitable betrayal. Ah, 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 ah. Mine is an evil laugh. No! Die! Oh, 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 God! Oh, my dear God in heaven! Ah!
I would now like to talk about three famous women playwrights. The first is Aphra Behn. She is considered the first professional woman playwright in England. She lived from 1640 to 1689. So she comes along during the Restoration in England, when in 1660, when women are first allowed to act on stage, and they are now allowed to write plays. She wrote 16 plays during her lifetime. The most famous of these plays is a play called The Rover. The Rover there's three storylines about a group of Englishmen who are in Naples during Carnival. And it still gets produced, though we have some trouble with the play now, because one of the so-called comic scenes in the play deals with a rape. A woman gets raped. And that is hard for modern audiences, as you well know, to find funny. Though, in that time in the Restoration period, it was considered a hilarious comedy. But as I said, The Rover is still produced, and Aphra Behn has been rediscovered, and a lot of her plays are now being produced that for many years were not, because we had focused on the men who wrote in the Restoration. And it's, I think, wonderful that we're now getting to see Aphra Behn performed. Some other American writers that I would like you to know. The first is Lillian Hellman. Lillian Hellman is a playwright. She was born in 1905. She wrote a number of what are considered great American plays. The one that I would like to talk about is her play, The Children's Hour. It premiered in 1934. It's the story of two young women. They start a school for girls in this small town. It is met with success. They have a number of young women studying at their school. And one of the young girls gets angry at the two women who are running the school. And she starts a rumor. And the rumor spreads. And the rumor is that they are lesbian lovers. The two women, all of a sudden, without any warning, students are being pulled from their school. No one in the community will talk to them. They become isolated. The one woman, her fiance, questions her, wants to know if this is the truth. And she tells him if he has to ask, she does not want to be with him. And he leaves her, which adds to the tragedy going on there at the home. And finally, at the end of the play, the one woman has a wonderful speech, and she talks about maybe it is true. I don't know. And she walks off stage. She goes to her room. And then we hear a gunshot. She commits suicide. So it's a tragic play, but a very, very powerful play that still, to this day, speaks to our time, as do many of the plays that Lillian Hellman wrote. She would pass away in 1984, but will always be remembered for her powerful plays. One of the things I neglected to say about the play The Children's Hour, one of the things that she became involved in and was very worried about was the anti-communist movement in the United States. Many playwrights and then later many people in the film industry, many actors, became blackballed because they were thought to have ties with communists. Lillian Hellman fought against this injustice for many years. And that is one of the themes in The Children's Hour. All it would take is a rumor, and a person's career could be ruined. They didn't have to prove it. And that was one of the things that she wanted to show with the play The Children's Hour. The next playwright that I'd like to talk about is one of my favorites. It's a lady named Beth Henley. Beth Henley's from Mississippi, and she was born in 1952. She's still alive and still writing great plays. In 1978, she wins a Pulitzer Prize for her play Crimes of the Heart. What I like about Miss Henley is almost all her plays are tragicomedies. They're quirky. The characters are very quirky. And since she writes a lot of plays about her hometown, Hazelhurst, Mississippi, many people in that town today tremble every time she writes a play for fear that they or some member of their family might be in one of her plays. She changes the names, but every time she writes a play, somebody's trying to figure out if they or someone they know might be the model for one of the characters in the play. In her Pulitzer Prize-winning play, Crimes of the Heart, it's about three sisters who live in this small town. And one of the sisters, when the play begins, the youngest sister, has been convicted of trying to murder her husband. Her husband wants to have her committed to an insane asylum. And she's very, very worried about this. And of course, she has hired a lawyer and she's trying to fight that. The reason the husband, she tried to kill her husband, was because he discovered that she was having an affair with a young African-American boy. And she thinks this is unfair. Like I said, they are very quirky characters. She's also having problems dealing with the fact that her mother has recently committed suicide. And there was a lot of press about this suicide because not only did she hang herself, but she hung her cat with her. And at one point in the play, Sissy, the young sister, discovers the reason for this, and she says, "Oh, I know why she killed that cat. People thought she was being mean, but no, she wasn't being mean. She was just scared about going to the afterlife, and she wanted to have her favorite cat with her." The other two sisters, one pretends that she's a country music star and she's returned to town, and she is not a country music star. And the third sister is afraid to get married because she feels that she has defective ovaries, and that worries her. It's a charming play. Again, some of it very funny, other parts quite serious as we follow these three sisters on their adventures. Besides Crimes of the Heart, she's written many other plays. The Miss Firecracker Contest, another one of her plays. It was turned into a film, and many, many more. I said three playwrights, but another one that you should probably know is Wendy Wasserstein, another American playwright, a Jewish American playwright. She won the Pulitzer Prize of Drama in 1989 for her play The Heidi Chronicles. The Heidi Chronicles. Unfortunately, Ms. Wasserstein passed away in 2006 due to cancer, but her plays are still with us and are performed often around the United States and around the world. Well, that ends my lecture on Theater of Diversity. I hope you've enjoyed learning about many different types of plays and playwrights from around the world, from other cultures. And I hope that you will go out and read these plays, go see these plays, learn more about them, because there's a rich treasure trove of material out there that unfortunately we don't often get to see. Anyway, that's it for today, and I'll see you next time.